The first time my father said it, I thought he was just being careless. We were sitting around the table after dinner, the usual plates still scattered around, everyone half listening to my brother talk about his latest contract. My father leaned back in his chair, proud in that simple, uncomplicated way parents sometimes are. "Your brother built all of this himself," he said. "No shortcuts, no handouts." No one looked at me when he said it. No one noticed the pause. I remember nodding slightly, as if the comment were harmless. At the time it almost was. Families simplify stories all the time. They round off the edges. They turn messy timelines into neat accomplishments. I let it go, but the sentence started appearing again in small variations. At birthdays, at gatherings, in phone calls when relatives asked how my brother's business was doing. He did it alone. The thing about repetition is that eventually it becomes history. Once enough people say something the same way, it stops sounding like opinion. It becomes fact. My brother never corrected them. That was the part that stayed with me. Years earlier, when his business was barely surviving its first year, he called me constantly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like someone asking a favor from someone they assume will say yes. A loan to cover payroll once, an introduction to a client who later became his largest account. Legal help when a contract went wrong. Another loan he called temporary. None of it felt unusual then. Helping family rarely does in the moment. You don't record it like evidence. You just assume the memory will be shared. But gradually I realized we remembered the same events very differently. When my brother told the story of his early struggles, the numbers disappeared. The introductions turned into chance meetings. The loans became risk he took. At first I tried to dismiss it as selective memory. Then I started noticing something else, the precision of what he left out. Not everything, just the parts that involved me. The second time my father said the phrase, "no handouts," I felt something shift. I didn't argue. Arguing inside a family rarely changes anything. People protect the version of reality that makes the most sense to them. Instead, I went home and opened my email archives. At the beginning it was almost casual curiosity. I searched old messages just to see if I was exaggerating in my own mind. The first loan confirmation appeared within minutes. Then, the contract review I'd done for him during a weekend. Then, the email where I introduced him to Daniel Mercer, who later became the client responsible for most of his early revenue. The pattern grew clearer the longer I looked. Bank transfers, signed repayment notes, messages thanking me for stepping in during a dispute with a supplier. Individually they were ordinary. Together they told a different story. What surprised me most wasn't the amount of help. It was how methodically it had been erased. I started organizing everything into a timeline, not because I planned to show anyone, at least that's what I told myself at the time, but the file kept growing. Dates, context, screenshots, copies of agreements, cross-references between conversations and transactions. 10 pages eventually. The document felt less like an accusation and more like an archive. A quiet reconstruction of something that had been gradually edited out of existence. Months passed. Then one evening my father said it again. "Your brother never relied on anyone." I didn't respond, but this time the decision settled in my mind without effort. The next family dinner happened 2 weeks later. Nothing about it felt unusual at first. My mother had cooked too much food as usual. My brother arrived slightly late, carrying the relaxed confidence of someone whose life was moving upward. Conversation drifted toward his newest expansion. A second office, another contract. My father smiled and said it again. He built it himself. I reached into the bag beside my chair. There was no dramatic moment, no raised voice. I simply placed a printed packet in front of each person at the table. 10 pages. "What's this?" my mother asked. "Just something I put together," I said. My brother laughed lightly when he saw the first page. "Research project." No one answered him. People began reading. Paper makes a particular sound when it's turned slowly. It filled the room in small, careful movements. Page 2 listed the first loan. Page 3 showed the repayment schedule that had quietly disappeared after 6 months. Page 4 documented the client introduction that became his largest contract. Emails were printed exactly as written. Bank confirmations were dated. There was nothing emotional in the report. Just sequence. My brother's smile faded around page 5. "You're making this look worse than it was," he said, but even he sounded uncertain. My father hadn't spoken yet. He was staring at one page longer than the others. Finally he said, almost to himself, "I remember signing this. It was the guarantee document from the first year, when my brother couldn't secure a small business line of credit without a co-signer." My father had forgotten it. Or maybe he had simply never connected it to the story being told now. The room stayed quiet. My brother leaned back in his chair, suddenly less comfortable. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. I didn't answer. The pages kept turning. No one shouted. No one accused anyone directly. The information did most of the work on its own. Eventually my father closed the packet. He looked at my brother for a long moment, not with anger exactly. More with the slow recalculation of someone realizing the picture in front of him had been incomplete. "How much of this is still unpaid?" he asked. It was the first question anyone had asked that night. My brother didn't answer immediately. And in that small hesitation, the conversation shifted, not dramatically, just enough that the certainty in the room had changed direction. Dinner ended earlier than usual. People stacked plates without much conversation. My mother kept the packet beside her as she cleared the table, occasionally glancing back at it. No one congratulated me. That wasn't the point. When I left the house later that evening, I realized something had changed, not loudly, not decisively. But the story my family told about my brother could no longer exist in the same, untouched form. And for the first time in a long while, the silence around my part in it had finally been replaced with something else. Not recognition, just awareness, which I found was enough.